Welcome to the Podunk Polymath Podcast.
The podcast dedicated to the sentiments of a secular, sarcastic, screwed-up Southern SJW and skeptic. I'm Morgan Stringer.
And I'm Trav Mamone from the Bi-Skeptical Podcast. Come on in.
Welcome to episode 47 of the Podunk Polymath Podcast. Thanks again for joining me. Hope you all had a super spectacular week. The intro this week was read by Morgan Stringer and Trav Mamone of the Bi-Skeptical Podcast. And of course, Trav also has the other podcast, By Any Means. I want to thank them for putting that together for me. It's very much appreciated. Have a bit of good news this week. First of all, I wanted to read a little message I got on my personal page from James Coltis, a friend of mine, well, a Facebook friend, but also a friend, I think. He said, had a thought at work the other day that I want to share. Your podcast is one of the warmest, most welcoming podcasts. You've got the smarts and the hearts, and you're one of the reasons I'm so thankful to have discovered Skeptical Atheist Podcast. I thought that was really nice, so I wanted to thank him. He'd actually sent this like a month ago, but with my memory, I always forget shit, so thankfully I remembered this time. So again, thanks, James. It really means a lot. Also, I am 5 likes away from 300 on the Facebook page, so I want to encourage everybody to tell your friends, your family, your drug dealer, whoever the fuck, to like the page. And once I hit 300, I'll be happy until I want to get to 400. And then 500. You get the idea. If you like what I do, just like the page if you don't do anything else, or maybe leave a review or both on iTunes. Speaking of iTunes, I also got a new iTunes review from Dark Mind, and it's Q-U-E instead of K. The palaver portion of the Podunk Polymath Podcast is possibly the penultimate pairing of people passing time in productive, passionate prattling upon politics, people, psychology, and anything else pertinent to persons who may be perceived as the other by the privileged populace. It preaches peace and acceptance through positive parlays with people whose perspectives and lives are poo-pooed by the likes of particular presidents with an unprecedented down-home feel. Notice a little pattern there? Yeah, there's a bit of alliteration, a lot of P's in there, so I thought that was pretty clever. And I appreciate it because I know that took a lot of work to try to figure out how to get that many P's in the review. So, much appreciated, Dark Mind. And I know who it is. I don't know if he wants me to use his real name. So, by default, I will not do so, but he's a pretty cool guy. And also, I've got 2 new patrons as well. I have Utah Outcast, those crazy guys and gal from Utah, obviously. Great show. Y'all need to check it out. And I also got Michael Schaefer from Real Estate. He's a friend on Facebook, a member of the Podunk Polymath Podcast Posse Facebook group, and just an all-around great guy. I want to thank him. And Nathan Dickey from Trolling with Logic and All Around Badass upped his pledge to $5. So that means I actually have to do some dirty things to him. So if I ever see him, he just needs to prepare himself. So thanks to Nathan. And another segue, because I was on Trolling with Logic, the show which he is a co-host. The latest episode, we talked about skepticism, firebrand atheists versus diplomatic atheists, and a lot of other stuff. So definitely go check that out. Even if it is with me on there, it's still a cool show. I didn't ruin it too much. So also, Secular Saturday is coming up July 22nd. You need to get your tickets now. They're cheaper now. If you wait till the time of, you have to pay more. So go to Secular Saturday website, which of course I'll put up again, and definitely check out. There's going to be some great speakers. Mandisa Thomas is going to be there, of course, as the keynote speaker. You definitely need to come on down. I'll be there and on the podcast panel, and I'm going to be dressed as Jesus if they have the outfit, which they say that, but I don't know if they do or not. So it should be interesting. Ticket sales are a little slow, so come on, man. We need y'all to pick it up so we can have a good time, have hopefully an after party and all that kind of good stuff. The Crails are going to be there. So that's enough right there, a reason for you to come on down. So it's Chattanooga, Tennessee, July 22nd, Brainerd Methodist Church. Come on down and check that out. Also, another event, the next Atheists at the Pub is going to be August 5th at 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. at the Poorhouse in 8th Avenue. Come and check that out. Should be interesting. They have a lot of good beer and also bourbons and whiskey, a whole bunch of that if you like that kind of thing. So not just beer. And they have misted patio. I don't know. Another reservation. I'm not sure if I'm able to do that part. Get out there, but I like to. Anyway, so if you're in the area, or even if you're not, if you just want to come up and hang out with a bunch of cool people, then y'all need to come up and check that out. I guess that's all for the pre-ramble. On the palaver this week, I speak with podcaster who is on the Brainstorm Podcast and also has a little series going on, Hardcore Skeptic Presents. He's Cory Johnston. We talk about his show. We talk about some of the controversies that ensued because of his show, his format, and all that kind of good stuff. And I'm actually a patron of his, full disclosure. And, you know, I try to be unbiased, but he's a cool guy. Has my back on a lot of stuff, so I appreciate that. It was a great conversation. I enjoyed talking to him, and I think y'all will find it very enlightening. A lot of talk about social justice and kind of anti-SJW as well, and kind of the differences between discussing these subjects with the two groups, I guess you could say. So anyway, hope y'all enjoy the palaver.
Has In God We Trust invaded your town? Are you tired of government officials who want to plaster In God We Trust on taxpayer-owned property? Are you afraid because your local sheriff placed an In God We Trust decal on the patrol cars? We are here to help. The original motto project is for those who feel the separation of church and state is an important issue and should be honored regardless of your belief or lack thereof. Theists, non-theists, and all free thinkers are welcome. We need your support to show politicians that diversity exists within our nation, and their promotion of a monotheistic religion and push for theocracy will not be tolerated. Stand up and be heard. Join us at originalmotto.us.
Hi, I'm Trav Mamone.
And I'm Morgan Stringer.
Do you like drunken rants, major shade throwing, and semi-funny skits?
Do you often find yourself reading the news and thinking, are you shitting me?
Then check out the Bi-Skeptical Podcast.
Every 2 weeks, we discuss politics, religion, and current events from a skeptical point of view.
You can find us on iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher.
Check us out, because in the end, we're all a little bi-curious.
Welcome to another edition of the Palaver here on the Podunk Polymath Podcast. This week I have with me a friend of mine who is co-host Brainstorm Podcast, as well as creator of Hardcore Skeptic Presents. Please welcome me in join me in welcoming Cory Johnston. How's it going, Cory?
Great. Yourself?
Pretty good.
Good.
So first of all, why don't you kind of give everybody a little introduction of what Brainstorm's about?
Sure. Brainstorm is just a bunch of goofy Saskatchewan skeptics and atheists that get together and talk about random news topics that have to do with atheism or skepticism. We've covered a lot of politics in the last couple of years, and we're Canadian, so we cover Canadian politics and we also cover American politics. So there's plenty of material there. And other than that, yeah, basically just a bunch of weirdos who get together and talk into microphones.
Okay, so you said this word Saskatchewan. I don't think many people know where the fuck that is.
Yeah, Saskatchewan is the province right in the center of Canada. It's like a giant rectangle.
And it's rather what we might describe as a country province, I guess. Of course, Canada's huge anyway, but... Yeah,
no, we have a huge rural population. Like, it's basically open space. We actually... The running joke around Saskatchewan is that you can watch your dog run away for 3 days. So it's pretty wide open.
Well, that's got its, it's a blessing and a curse, I guess. If you happen to be more on the liberal side, I would think usually in rural areas, it's a little more conservative, generally speaking. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, it definitely tends to be. Like, you talk to some of these... I work in the oil field, and these guys are not even often high school educated, but they've been setting their roots for however many long years and like their whole life, and it's just some pretty backwards views about even just men and women, let alone like people of color or different gender identities. Like, it's just completely backwards, or I guess not backwards, but just definitely not up to date thinking.
Yeah, well, like I said, that seems to be a rural mentality.
Yeah,
but
it's too bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it is, though. I mean, you would think, well, maybe the internet will change things a little bit, once this newer generation kind of gets a hold, maybe, that, more education.
Yeah, I could see that.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I know we had some younger guys work out with us a few times, and, you talk about tradition, and they really still put a lot of stock in the idea of tradition. And I mean, I say things like, well, tradition isn't useful unless you have a good reason to keep going with it. And they'd actually get pretty upset with me. So.
Oh, well, okay. Fuck 'em. Anyway.
Yeah, that's about it.
So, we're talking about Brainstorm. Of course, I need to mention that I believe that was the first show I was on as a guest when I started Podunk Polymath. So, thank you for that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I kind of had just started listening to your show. I think you had 2 or 3 episodes in, and I thought, oh, shit, right on. This seems like a pretty good guy to have on. Pretty fun. That was a lot of fun episode, too.
Yeah, it was fun. And I think it was the night before I went to NanoCon. I can't remember. There was something going on that weekend I was doing, and it was the night before that. So I think that's when maybe after. I don't know. My memory is fucked. It doesn't matter anyway. But yeah, that was fun. White Onion Privilege was the name of the episode.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was drinking, so that's always fun. And also I wanted to mention that your accent is super Canadian. And
in case they didn't notice, eh?
So we got the battle of the accents here on this episode. Kind of the Canadian, I guess you could call it the country Canadian accent. And I got the southern accent. Even
my Canadian friends apparently think that I've got a pretty thick accent. So it must be something about growing up in the country that makes a difference.
Yeah, it's definitely a thicker, different accent. But the South ain't no better, so
right.
I can't really say anything. So anyway, the main thrust I wanted to have you on for this episode was because you started a project called the Hardcore Skeptic Examines.
Yeah.
And I jumped on board on that as soon as I heard about it because I had heard you on others, your show, and you seem to be pretty objective and pretty fair-minded guy. So I thought, well, this will be interesting. And especially when I saw it was about social justice, I was like, okay. And then I saw you're going to interview both sides. I was like, okay, well, we'll see how this goes. But I knew you weren't like a Robert Rubin type. So Dave Rubin, Robert Rubin.
Yeah.
Not the music producer guy, Dave Rubin. Now, the way you structured it was a little different. So, but I'll let you go ahead and talk about kind of the genesis of that.
Well, I mean, I've always kind of thought that I didn't have enough, I don't know, I guess you could say, of my own voice. Like on Brainstorm, we have so much give and take. We have such a big crew that sometimes things don't get examined as deep as you might want them to. And social justice has just been such a big topic in skeptic and atheist circles lately that I thought, for sure, I better cover this in some way, but I just didn't know how to approach it. So originally I was going to take a bunch of different interviews, like with pro and anti social justice types, and kind of mix them together with some research and just some commentary of my own, and kind of take a look at this and build this big 3-hour project, or just for one episode, and mix it all together, question, answer, kind of play it out like that. But after I got about 15 interviews in, I just realized that there's no way I could do justice to some of these interviews and some of the information. And frankly, it would have been even more work than I've been putting in now to mix it down that way. So instead, I'm doing each interview as its own standalone episode in a series. And I think I just released number 7, which addresses the topic of trigger warnings, with Ari Stillman, who is a PTSD sufferer, someone who is going in dealing with therapy, and who has a background in psychology. So to me, that seemed like a really good deep dive on that particular branch of the social justice topics. And I mean, I've had a bit of give and take with some of the anti-social justice types, because admittedly, my bias is pro-social justice. And some of the misinformation that comes out of the anti-side kind of gets me a little annoyed.
So, yeah, let's kind of dig a little bit into... So you talk about Ari.
Right.
And you had them on and talking about, that kind of the social justice aspect. First of all, let's talk about who you had on, who you would consider pro-SJW before we get into the fun stuff.
Well, so far of the released episodes, I've had Trav Mamone of the By Any Means and By Skeptical podcast. I had Sincere Carabo from the American Humanist Association. And I've had Ari Stillman. And there was somebody else. Edwin. I'm not going to give his last name because he's been harassed online by anti-SJW types quite a bit. So, but he's a PhD candidate in sociology at a university here in Canada. So I've had the pro side has been pretty educated, pretty well structured. Like their arguments are very sound and they've got sources to back up what they're saying. And then on the anti side, I put out a call to as many people as I could to get anti-SJW spokespeople. And it turns out that most of them are not educated in sociology at any level, or they are, but it's like a very superficial type of education in it. It's not a PhD candidate, like you say. And so I guess for the anti side, just to name a couple, I had Ed Smith and Dustin Dark from the Wayward Atheists podcast. And I have yet coming up, I have Atheist Joe. He runs an atheist organization down in the U.S. somewhere. I'll have to listen to the episode again to remember. But I also had a couple atheist YouTubers, and who else? Yeah, shit, I'm drawing a blank on some of these names. But yeah, the first couple were I had Ed Smith, Randy Tyson from the Legion of Reason podcast here in Canada, and Ed Smith and Dustin Dark were the first three anti-SJWs that have been released.
You guys still have more coming, okay. So, of course, since you're on the pro-SJW slant, those aren't going to be as interesting, I guess, and not as juicy, because... you agree with them, but that's not the only reason. I've listened to these, and if I can, it's my show. I was going to say, if I can give my opinion, well, of course I can, but
for sure, yeah.
But I know Sincere. Well, I know of Sincere. I've had him on my show, and Ari I've had on my show as well. And so they're pretty reasoned people. They're people that you can talk to, and if there's differences, maybe you can give a little pushback, and they are willing to have these conversations with you. On the other side, though, there seems to be some issues. Now, I do want to say that on the first ones of those, you actually gave a commentary after the fact and didn't actively disagree with them during their interview segments.
Yeah. Now,
I will say that I was like, well, I don't... Because you said that ahead of time, so I wasn't surprised by it.
Right. And I don't want to make excuses, but I think that was a product of the nature of the original plan for the project. Like, these were the very first interviews I did, right? So I was going to ask these guys questions, and then I was going to respond to their questions or their concerns with social justice with a pro side, kind of ask questions, response, concern, response kind of thing. And so as a result, I didn't push back on pretty much any of the interviews, but the one with Ed, which was the third one released, he asked me to put that out earlier than some of the others. So I was fine with that. But when I had done Ed's interview, I had actually done a number of interviews and had kind of been leaning towards putting these out as individual episodes already. So then there was a little bit more pushback, and it was I thought it was a much more productive conversation. Like, it actually had a little bit of back and forth. So I didn't do as much of a commentary after the fact for that one, but like I say, I don't want to make excuses. It probably seemed to these guys like I jumped on them after the fact, and that probably wasn't fair.
I would agree with you only if you hadn't said that up front. That's what you were going to do, and they went in knowing that those were the terms of the interview to begin with.
Right.
And they agreed, so therefore they can't say a fucking thing as far as I'm concerned. They can't complain about after the fact.
Yeah, and although they did both feel attacked or like I had done something unfair or something wrong, and maybe I did, maybe I didn't, maybe I can justify it, but I took that criticism and I tried to change the method of the way I was going to do the show. I was actually going to send my concerns to Ed, like after editing the episode, and then get his response, and then I was going to insert that into the episode as well. So there would be like a bit of a give and take in the post show, or maybe even insert it into certain segments of the show or the interview. But because of some online drama, me and Ed weren't friends anymore, so I couldn't do that with his interview. So maybe I'll be able to do that in a future one.
Yeah, I was a party to that. Some of that drama that ensued.
Right, eh?
See? Every Canadian I talk to, like, nobody says A. I said, oh, really? Go talk to Cory.
I know at least one who does. Yeah.
I won't, I can't say shit. I'm a Southerner, so I say a bunch of country shit, so I can't say anything. So, y'all being the operating the main one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, on listening to those, and like I said, like you, I have a bias towards social justice.
Right.
And when I listened to the ones you were talking with the other guys, and like I already said, you said ahead of time that you're going to be like that. So and even when I was listening back to him, I'm like, oh God, he's not pushing back at all. But I already knew ahead of time. But even when you're listening to it, you're like, Jesus Christ. He keeps saying yes. Like it sounds like you're agreeing with him, but I understand what you were doing. But see, that's what we call on the principle of charity. You automatically try to assume the best of somebody when they're doing something like that in rhetoric, right?
That's right.
Especially if I know who you are already, and I've seen your work, and there's a history of it, so I wasn't worried about that so much. And when I heard, let's see, the one with Ed Smith seemed to be okay when I listened to it the first time around. There were some things I didn't disagree with, but there were some things that seemed to be fairly reasonable. Dustin, that one seemed to be okay. But of course, like you said, when you went back and...
Well, the thing is, like, you get into these conversations, and they like Randy and Dustin both did it. Ed not so much. He more talked about ideas, and we can disagree about ideas all day. But Dustin and Randy, they put out these kind of gish gallop of examples of events that reinforce their belief, like ideas like black students at a college who don't want white philosophers being taught to them, and there's no context given. It's just, look at this example where these black students just don't want to hear about white philosophers. Well, when you look into it, even a cursory Google search, you find that, it turns out that this was the Black and Asian or African and Asian school of study, and it stands to reason that they should learn about African and Asian philosophers. So once you get the context, then you can say, well, okay. And that's what I did in the post commentary, was I looked at some of these things they said, and that apparently is not okay.
Well, yeah, you went back and fact checked, and I don't think
that's right.
That's something I would think you would want to do. I don't see the issue with that, except, like I said, they complained because you basically didn't give them a chance to respond to it.
Yeah.
Which, again, if you enter into any sort of conversation knowing ahead of time what the rules are, and then you complain after the fact, even though you knew the rules, and you don't get to say a fucking thing as far as I'm concerned. And of course, what ensued was a bit of a kerfuffle, I guess, online. There was a bit of... Because I had shared your episode. And I think it was... Was it Dustin Dark or Ed Smith? I can't remember which one it was, but it was...
I think it was Dustin's. Yeah, I think it was Dustin's.
Yeah, it was Dustin's. And I shared it on the Podunk Polymath page, and I basically made... I don't know if I'd call it inflammatory inflammatory intro to the link, I was like, yeah, this guy's the real shit and this Dustin's a dumbass. I didn't say it like that, but
I think, yeah, you gave me a lot of credit, but
yeah, that's what, and I guess I was a little bit, what might be called critical maybe, but not really. But he jumped right on there because I had tagged you in the post. I had tagged you personally in the post. And then it just got, out of hand.
Well, I mean, I don't mean to talk shit about somebody, right? But Dustin got quite defensive about my commentary after the fact, even though I specifically was trying not to attack the man, right? Like I didn't want to attack who he was or what he believes even, or I just wanted to address what he said in a reasonable way and just, if I could, just disagree, and so I did that. And I mean, there was a few things where he took quotes out of context and he was talking about facts that weren't real. And he took quite issue with the fact that I could disprove what he was saying with a quick Google search, even though he decided that doesn't qualify as research. So I mean, yeah, your post blew up, right? Like, and so I had to remove it from my page. It was still on your page, right?
Yeah. Which I told you to remove. I'm like, wait a minute, it's on my fucking page. He can't. I left that shit up there though, because I was like, fuck him. I don't care.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I tried. I have had in the past. I've had people come on my page and they get insulting to each other, and then somebody's talking shit about somebody else, and you go, well, okay, this is getting out of hand. Nobody's talking about the issue, so let's delete these comments that are shitty, or if it gets too bad, then I just have to delete the whole thread, right? And so I did that. I removed it from my page. I untagged myself, and then later on, I had to I've had many interactions with Dustin since then, but he kept bringing this back, like that I had deleted the whole thread and that I was just a dishonest SJW, and yeah. So then I finally, I am no longer friends with Dustin.
Well, I don't want to go any further outside of that and just make it a Dustin bash fest. That's ridiculous.
I don't want to talk shit about guys. It's just that, we see this a lot of this kind of behavior where somebody will come onto your own personal page and they'll attack you and they'll attack you and they'll attack you, and they won't actually talk about your points. They'll attack you as a person, and then they'll gang up, like they'll tag their buddies and they'll gang up on you, and then when you finally say fuck it and delete them or delete the comments or block the people, then everybody's crying you as a censor or a bully of your own. Well, no, I'm only just trying to defend myself, and you see this all the time. Like it is enough to annoy a person.
Yeah, and I've called this out before as dogpiling, and I don't like it from anybody. I mean, it's like...
No, that's right.
And it's not that's not even the worst ones. The worst ones are on a public page, somebody's public profile, especially that's really prominent in certain, if they're a certain...
Yeah.
Known for a certain point of view that, is maybe not be as popular, might be divisive or something.
Yeah.
And then if you say something even little... just critical maybe. Oh yeah. Boy, it's like sharks in the water. They see that blood and they just attack. That's right. And I've been a victim of that before, and I try not to. I try not to do that. Let that happen on my page, and I'll try not that many, because I have an echo chamber, which means only to me that I don't want people talking shit, being assholes on my page. So I guess that if that's an echo chamber, then Yodele Yehu, like I said before, I'm going to echo everywhere. Anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I find that it happens everywhere. Like a good example is what happened on Dan Arrow's page. And I mean, we can disagree with things that Dan has said and done, and that's fine. And I'm sure he would give us a back and forth if we wanted to. But he posted on Twitter, I believe rape victims, and then that got blown. Like I think it was Blair White actually said, or it was somebody, some YouTuber posted Dan Arrow raped me on her Twitter, and then all of that person's fans started dogpiling on Dan. Like it was, and then they even even went from Twitter onto his public Facebook page, and in some cases his personal Facebook page, so he had to change the settings on his personal Facebook page. Like, it's that kind of behavior that's reprehensible to me, right?
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. I mean, it's ridiculous, and frankly, it's not worth giving too much airtime to or whatever. But it's there, and people should not do it. And I was a victim of it. I'm not going to complain about it, but it is what it is. And I just left it alone after a while, and you deleted it anyway, so it didn't really matter.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I've found is the best. If I end up deleting a thread, or if I can just stop, if I don't get any more notifications, then I'm good.
Yeah, just leave it alone.
Yeah.
Well, let's get in a little more positive light.
Sure.
Let's talk about some stuff that you have learned during your interviews that you thought was important and enlightening.
I think a large part of my learning experience has been the idea that we need to be, as white cis dudes, we need to be listening more than talking in a lot of these spaces, right? Like you and I are both part of the Angry Black Rant podcast group, and that's not my place to be putting my 2 cents in every time somebody has an issue, right? Like, I'm there to learn and listen, and I think that's the most important part here.
So is there anything that stands out to you that was more important than other things, or something that you had a revelation on that you hadn't previously thought about?
Well, in one of my upcoming interviews with Brian Harrington, he's a gay activist he's a white cis dude, but he's gay, and he's from Cleveland. And he was talking about if you go to a Black Lives Matter rally and you hear them say things like whites in the back or whites stay quiet or whatever, and that if you feel uncomfortable because of that, then you may just have to recognize that you're not ready to be in that space, and that's okay, because we're all on different branches of where we're learning, right? Or where our social activism is, or where we feel like we can put in our help. And if we're not ready to listen in some of these spaces, then we're better off just not being there, and that's okay. Apparently, like that's something he really emphasized to me, was that it's okay if you're not ready to go to an LGBT space and listen, rather than let your voice overpower other people.
Yeah, and that's something that's difficult to kind of grasp for some people, I think. I think it's the idea of they think it's a personal attack or something.
Yeah. Like, it's the same thing as you find when you use the word privilege, right? Like, people feel like, well, I worked hard, I had a tough life, so I'm not privileged. Well, that's not really what people are saying. They're not saying that you didn't have it hard, right? They're saying that you didn't have it hard because you're white, or you didn't have it hard because you're a straight cis guy. Like,
yeah, it's hard to put. What was it? You may have been unprivileged, or you may have had a hard life, but it wasn't because you were white.
Yeah, that's right.
It was because of other factors, and I don't think people quite grasp that.
Yeah, it seems like that's really. Well, because everybody thinks of themselves as having to work hard to get what they have, right? And if I had to work hard, then obviously I'm not privileged. So,
well,
it's just a misunderstanding of it, I think.
And we also have the idea of intersectionality, which some people, oh my God, what the hell are you talking about? Basically, it means there's different layers of privilege, different strata, I guess you could say. Like, you could be a white person, right? And you have privilege in that sense, but if you're a woman, well, then your privilege goes down a little bit because women don't have male privilege. And if you're black, then, it's just all different kinds of layers there, depending upon your color, your skin color, or your sexual orientation, or, anything, any number of factors, your ethnicity. And so I think it's a little more complicated than people realize. And sometimes I think people just don't want to deal with it, to be honest with you.
Well, it does make us uncomfortable, right? Like when we hear that somebody's had a hard life because or a harder situation in some way because of the color of their skin, well, we automatically assume that they're talking about us. Like, well, I haven't done that. Or, like we always feel like these are personal attacks, and it makes us uncomfortable. And how we react to that seems to be a large part of what feeds the anti-SJW mentality.
Yeah, it's this. I think a lot of it is just this unwillingness to step outside. Step outside oneself.
Yeah,
and kind of look at the bigger picture. I think empathy is a difficult concept for some people to get, and I don't necessarily think that it's malicious, even though certainly there are people who are malicious while doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
But they just are unable to kind of look outside themselves and see what's going on,
Yeah, that's right. I think, like, even going back to the interviews that I did with the anti-SJWs, like, even those guys, in general, I don't think of them as, bad people or anything. Like, they're not bad guys. I disagree with them on a lot of stuff. I disagree with some of their behaviors, but I still see them as, like, these decent people who just misunderstand a lot of this stuff. And, I mean, once we're driven by ideology too, like that, like once we've come to a conclusion, right? Like we're stuck in our thinking. And once we've come to a conclusion, then it's hard to change that. And if I think that, racism has been dead for 10 years or 20 years, well, then it's really going to be tough to convince me otherwise.
Oh, well, they think that. Yeah, because they're not black.
That's true. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's what I'm talking about. They think because they don't see something personally, then therefore it does not exist.
Yeah.
Even though white people have been willingly blind, willingly, I don't know, not all of them been willingly maybe, but they kind of haven't gone out of their way to find out that this shit has been going on forever. Just like, this whole, they act like cops killing black people just because they got it on camera has just started. No,
right,
that's been going on for forever. Because now we got cameras on our phones is the reason we're just now seeing it.
Yeah, the fact that we can see it now shows us just how bad it was before, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's just a percentage.
Yeah.
That's just people who actually have phones on, and when that happens, they can actually film it or whatever. That doesn't include the people who didn't have to have their phones on them or can't afford phones or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
So there's a lot of that going on, and it's like I said, it's like this blindness, this willing blindness to things.
Yeah.
Because like you said, people are not comfortable with it. And I don't blame anybody for that because, I mean, it's hard to deal with uncomfortable truths a lot of times.
Yeah.
That's the reason a lot of people turn to religion. But that's
right.
Whole different story. We won't dwell on that too much. But, yeah, I just think that it's a lot of confirmation bias, a lot of unwillingness to do any
that's right.
self-examination or anything and say, why do I think this way? Why do I feel this way? And then kind of trying to go into that. And it's, like I said, it's difficult. You get entrenched in a certain point of view, and a lot of people are comfortable. And when you challenge that, you challenge their identity a lot of times. And that's really uncomfortable. And they get really defensive because it's like a part of them almost. And it's like you're kind of denying a part of their existence if you call them out on it. So,
yeah, that's right.
So it's a difficult line to walk, Yeah,
it's interesting because I know, I guess I kind of lost my train of thought, but it is an interesting idea, like this idea that you are attacking somebody's identity just by presenting them with information they didn't have before, right? It often results in that kind of uncomfortable feeling, and we all get it, I think. But again, it's how you react to that. If you react in an angry, defiant way to information because it contradicts the way you see the world, then you're going to have a bad time, I think.
Yeah, you're going to have a bad time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that I did listen to one of the episodes I really enjoyed. It was the one you had with the sociologist, and his name is escaping me around. What was his name?
Edwin. Yeah, I didn't give his last name because he had a blog for a while, and he got harassed online, and he got doxxed at one time. So
that's just ridiculous. I mean,
yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed his episode. I really enjoyed him giving sort of some of the sociological aspects of the reasons that go behind some of this stuff. I mean, it's stuff I have heard before from like if you ever read the new Jim Crow,
right?
I recommend anybody go read that book if you want to know anything about, how blacks are treated in this country and how things are stacked against them institutionally. I would encourage anybody to go read that. But there were lots of points I was really interested to hear from him. Would you say he was probably he seemed to be one of your favorite guests, I would think, so far?
Yeah, it's tough to say because I enjoyed all of them, right? But that was one of the early ones with an educated person on the subject. Like he is studying extremist groups in like the KKK and stuff, and he's studied male gender issues, right? So he's knowledgeable in these subjects. He was really cool with my lame person's understanding of a lot of things, and he really entertained the questions that I had built up from previous interviews with Randy and Dustin, because I took some of those interviews with Randy and Dustin and I changed what they were saying into questions in a way for future guests, because much of what they say is about this, the discourse, as Sincere called it in his interview, or it is called, I guess, the discourse of individualism, which is kind of an attempt to refute identity politics based on, we're all individuals, not groups. Like, and yeah, actually, Sincere gave me a great essay, or I guess it's a paper, like it's a long paper discussing the discourse of individualism, and it's very informative. Like, it's really, I could even send it to you if you want.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but with Edwin, and he's a Canadian too, so he's got a little bit of a similar background as I do with some of the history anyway, and he knew like things about what has happened in Canada with deplatforming speakers and actually even kicking out certain undesirable types out of our country because they were spreading anti-Semitism in schools. And it definitely gave me an interesting balance to some of the other interviews. And I like to think I've become friends with Edwin since, so that probably helps.
Like I said, I think there has been this trend in America, but I'm sure it's spread its way to Canada, just like everything else does around here in North America. This trend of anti-intellectualism and this kind of idea of just distrusting, authorities on subjects for some reason. I don't understand that. And somehow, if somebody who knows something about the subject you're talking about, you actually have somebody that knows what they're talking about, well, somehow you're just, you're an elitist or something.
It sort of speaks to, like, I've been reading a lot about argumentation, and it speaks to this attachment we seem to have to the quote-unquote logical fallacies, right? So an appeal to authority is technically a logical fallacy in an informal sense. But that doesn't mean that everybody who has knowledge is untrustworthy, right? Like, and it doesn't mean that you disagree with the consensus on a subject if that field of experts agrees on something. Like I recently had a debate online where I was discussing actually a topic that I talked with Edwin about, where we discussed the resume studies where people with racialized names didn't get callbacks based on the fact that their names weren't quote unquote white names. Like, they were racialized names, so they just didn't get a call back, even if they had the same qualifications as someone else. And I presented the study. I was talking to people, and I was presenting the study and presenting the consensus of information from sociologists or social psychologists, and they just would not accept it. They just couldn't accept that this was a legitimate thing. The study's right in front of them, so they try and nitpick that. So then you say, well, this is accepted by X number of experts. This has been cited 3,000 times. Well, that's not good enough. That's an appeal to authority. Like, it's the death of expertise, I guess. There's a book coming out that talks about the death of expertise, where people just refuse to trust experts, and it's becoming a very real problem.
Yeah, and I think doesn't help that our politicians are kind of, especially Republicans, seem to be feeding into that. Especially when you have people saying the science isn't clear on climate change. When you have like the right. It's not just in this country. The vast majority throughout the world have agreed that man-made climate change is a major, major problem.
Yeah, that's right.
And they just seem to want to fucking ignore it. Of course, there are financial reasons for that. And of course, the politicians only care because they want that money in their pocket, the corporate oil money in their pockets.
Yeah.
But then that's the problem, is they convince the people who are voting for them that's the case, and they believe it,
Yeah, that's right.
And so that makes it even worse. And these are the people that go out and vote,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I read a couple of years ago about, I don't know how big of a study it was, but there was some evidence in this study that said people will actually do math incorrectly if it's more in line with their ideology. Like, you could show them a spreadsheet with financial records of their government in it, and if and you tell them that it's from their political party, then they'll look at it and they'll do it correctly or whatever. And then you tell them it's the opposite, or you tell them that it's the other political party, and they'll actually do the math incorrectly. Like, they'll actually get things like 2 + 2 = 4 wrong because it doesn't line up with their ideology. So it's I'm not sure how to fix things like that, but it's troubling.
Well, you can't fix cognitive, bias.
Yeah.
Basically, that's human nature, unfortunately. The only thing you can do is give people best information that's possible, and just, give them the critical thinking skills. I think is the main problem, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's true.
And that can overcome some of it, but you can't really get over confirmation bias. And plus, when you have this kind of onslaught of fake news or whatever, you that muddies the waters even more. So it's hard to tell what's true and what's not. Well, if you don't know what to look for, and some people don't want to look because they're lazy. Some of it, and some of they just don't really know, I guess. Especially this older generation, they were raised, a lot of them, the older people were raised, government is your friend, government is somebody to be trusted.
Right.
And they just take it on faith a lot of times. Of course, after Watergate, then that feeling kind of faded quite a bit. But
that's right.
The generation that grew up before then, I think, especially I think some of the boomers kind of had that idea. Well, some of them, it depends, more conservative ones, not the hippie types, but
yeah, that's right.
Kind of get this idea that the government is there for you, is good for you, and that you should listen to them unquestionably. And I think that's the whole, that kind of appeal to authority, quite honestly, and that some people just don't believe that people could actually be doing this against their interests.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
The
only thing we can do is plan for the future.
Yeah, that's right. I think that there's a lot of, personally, I have a lot of hope with the next generation of college students. I know that everybody's really afraid of the control, the authoritarian left on college campuses. But I see much of that, and I see that extreme reaction as being a vast minority. And I see a lot of much more progressive, much more belief in racial equality and like gender equality and acceptance of everybody's gender and sexuality. And I myself, I actually do have hope for the next group of people who are going to be running the world.
Yeah, I don't know. You're an optimistic type. I, on the other hand, am not.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm more of a pessimist or realist, however you want to say it. I've always been that way. Now, that's not to say in some instances I don't see a bright side. But when it comes to human nature, man, I don't know. It's just I don't trust it in general. I can hope. I hope that you're right. I hope that this newer generation, because the nuns have been rising, of course, the no religion types, not just atheists, agnostics, none religion. They mark none. They're not necessarily maybe they're spiritual.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Yeah, but people are looking at more information, looking at the internet and trying to find out about things, and I guess that's a positive sign. But I don't know. I mean, there are other things that aren't great, especially in rural areas. That shit moves slow as molasses, as they would say around here.
Yeah, it does.
And so it takes a long time to kind of overcome that shit.
Yeah, I deal with people who have extreme sexists or extreme racists, like on a daily basis when I'm at work, because I'm out in the middle of nowhere in southern Saskatchewan. And I mean, I treat everybody well, but if I get a chance, I will have a conversation with people about racial stereotypes or about gender stereotypes. And I mean, it often falls on deaf ears, but every once in a while you get that glimmer where you're like, okay, I might be making progress. I'm chipping away at that. But so even in the rural areas, it will, I think, slowly come around.
I hope you're right. And you're a positive guy, so, I'll just listen to you.
Sure, yeah. Sometimes it's the optimists that are the most deluded, though. So.
Nah, it's the optimists that get, that kind of go make us go in the right direction sometimes,
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes. Depends.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I personally want to tell you, I've enjoyed listening to your series, especially, like I said,
Thanks, man.
The one with Edwin, Edwin Awesome, I'll just call him that.
Edwin Awesome.
Yeah, that could be
I should have called him that, yeah. I should have said that's his last name.
And, of course, listening to Dustin Dark especially, it was problematic for me, not so much because of what he had to say, but because of his argumentation style. And what...
Yeah.
Of course, I posted about him. Everybody like, oh yeah, he's a douche canoe. I don't know why you even, whatever.
Right.
But I'm like, okay, because I'd heard him and Michael on, it used to be atheistically speaking, serious inquiries only.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's whatever,
Well, actually on that episode of Atheistically Speaking, I thought that while Dustin had started off kind of shitty, that he had made progress throughout the episode. Right?
I agree with that, actually, yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, maybe he's a pretty reasonable guy. And I mean, that's where I started talking to him more. And I used to be really pretty decent friends with Dave Edwards from the Wayward Atheists. And he vouched for him. He said, well, he's pulling away from Mike, right? He says he doesn't really want to associate himself too much with what Michael's saying anymore. And I was like, okay, man. Well, I mean, if you vouch for him, then he must be a good guy. But now I mean, I don't want to talk shit, but I'm not friends with any of them anymore. So,
well, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I don't have a problem with disagreeing with somebody as long as it's an honest disagreement and you're not you're saying shit that you have no backup for, that you have no proof of, and you're just kind of being dishonest about it.
Well, and I can even deal with that. Like, I could have a Christian apologist as a friend and still think that they're completely full of shit and being disingenuous. But if they behave in a way that I cannot, that alienates people or treats people badly or is attacking in some way, that's when I can't be friends with somebody anymore. So
attacking people, I think that's the biggest thing. And I don't like that from anybody.
Yeah, that's right. Like, and I mean, I feel like I've kind of been attacking Dustin and those guys for part of this episode, and I don't really mean to be that way. I'm just trying to lay out my feelings and the way this kind of went from my perspective, right?
Well, I egged you on, but I've tried not to be too, because there is some shit that was said about me that I did not, I wasn't too happy about. But I haven't even brought that up because it's not relevant.
And frankly, I told that is a part of why I cannot be friends with them anymore, because they would not cease with that, even after being prompted to. So, I mean, not Randy. Randy and I had a separate disagreement, and he actually unfriended me. So maybe I crossed the line there.
I doubt that. If anybody has seen the thing that Jeremiah made, the alignments or whatever.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
If anybody's familiar with Dungeons and Dragons at all or anything like that, you have the alignments, the moral alignments or whatever. Like it goes from lawful good. Was it lawful good, true good? Was it lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good? Lawful neutral, true neutral, chaotic neutral. Lawful evil, neutral evil or whatever, and chaotic evil.
Yeah, that's right.
You were on true. He made you true neutral, which I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
But you're like, oh no, I'm not neutral, and then but you just proved his point. Good job, good job.
Yeah, I do feel like I'm super biased sometimes, but I'm okay with somebody else thinking that I'm neutral.
Well, it's good. Like self-examination to me is a proof that somebody is able to kind of take facts into hand, and if they're proven wrong, then they're willing to change their mind on certain things. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I mean, I'm not perfect by any stretch in this, but I do try very hard to check my own biases and keep track of where I am on things that I've got the right facts. So
yeah, I think you do quite a bit of research. I mean, how do you prepare for these shows? You put a lot of preparation in these, don't you?
Yeah, well, when I did the interviews, I didn't, but I had a set number of questions, and then I would just deal with those questions and whatever, and try and roll with the punches, as they say, right? But after the fact, like when I'm doing the editing process, I got a notebook that I'm handwriting notes in constantly. Like every interview has multiple pages of notes, and then if something in those notes needs a check or a response in some way, then I make sure that I'm Googling for, as long as I have the time. And sometimes I have a lot of time on my hands. So I'm sitting there on the computer fact-checking people quite a bit if I can.
Sometimes you don't, because I've heard you say you didn't have time to get things out like you have last couple of times. You posted shit saying it was late. And I'm like, God damn it, Corey, what am I spending my money on?
Yeah, that's right. Goddamn late episodes.
Yeah, I know. But you do have your work schedule's pretty hectic. And different. It's like strange or something. I don't know. Yeah,
like my job is 7 on, 7 off. So I work for a week, and I might as well not exist for that week. Like I drive to and from work for a total of about 4 hours a day, and then I'm at work for 12 hours a day. So for 16 hours a day, and then I sleep 5 hours or something. So that's my week, my work week, and then my week off I spend trying to catch up with everything else.
Yeah. Well, that's understandable, and I'm impressed that you put that effort in, and then of course you already have the other podcast or whatever. So
yeah, that's right. And I've got to prepare for that one. Like I do the production, I do the notes, I hand out stories to the rest of the crew, and then after the fact I publish it online and whatnot. And then I have a family as well. So
I didn't even know about that part.
Yeah, I have a girlfriend and 2 kids, so.
Well, damn, man. Yeah, and you do all the working out all the time.
Yeah, that's right. I try to hit the gym for at least an hour and a half a day, so.
Yeah, so, you're not the only one. I've seen another guy. Keith Spielman does that shit, too. He's always he's a personal trainer. I'm like, is that all y'all fucking do up there? Is fucking work out?
Yeah.
Jesus.
That's right.
I mean, I guess it's cold all the time. There ain't shit else to do. I don't know, whatever you Canadians. Aren't you supposed to be playing hockey or curling or some shit like that? I don't know.
Well, I come from a curling family, but I never got into it. So
I don't know how, man, because that's some cool shit, man. Pushing a big-ass stone down the ice and then sweeping in front.
It's Canadian golf.
The sweeping thing, does that actually work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can direct because it clears whatever resistance might be in the path of that rock, eh? So if you want to make sure that it's sliding straight, then that brushing sure makes a difference.
Okay, if you say. Yeah. I saw that the first time in, I think it was the Olympics in Vancouver, I think it was.
Okay.
And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? This is some bizarre shit. It was neat, though. I mean, it reminded me of marbles with a big-ass stone or something, where you're trying to...
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Yeah, you got to get it in the middle, and
knock the other ones out or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah. So, Cory, as kind of a last question, I wanted to kind of get you what you think overall if your series has been a success so far.
I think so. I think it's hard to gauge, right? I think that I've had people who may be on the fence about certain subjects, who've listened to interviews and have responded quite positively.
Well, for myself, I think you've done a good job of kind of presenting both points of view. And even though some people might argue that you didn't push back enough, I would argue, in fact, that now I remember what it was. When I posted that, I basically said, you gave them enough rope to hang themselves. That's what it was.
Yeah.
You let them fucking show how much of a dumbass they were by just letting them talk.
Yeah, I think for somebody who is, like, actually my Randy interview, the same person who said that Trav sounded super reasonable and really presented their position well, that same person said that Randy sounded super condescending and was not very convincing at all. Like, so I think that, like you say, like, yeah, I didn't necessarily push back much, but these guys, you let them talk, they will hang themselves, or they will hang their own case, like, because they don't have any real case to present.
I think you did a good job. Some people might, like I say, argue with the idea of first just letting them get it out and then later on adding that, your comments at the end, which, anybody can argue with that, I guess. But I think that in the end, like I said already, if they agree to those terms, and they don't have any room to say anything as far as I'm concerned. And I think that format lends itself to people being able to get their views out without, because sometimes when you get in these arguments, people are talking all over each other and attacking each other, and they're not able to really get their views heard or lay out exactly what they're thinking. And I think the way you're doing it, it kind of gives them a chance to kind of say what they're going to say, right? And then you go back and kind of, and it might be different if you were somebody, a dishonest prick or something, who after the fact was like, look, this fucking guy was an asshole. He didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. I mean, but you're just,
right.
To me, you're reasonable. And you lay out the caveats beforehand, and you say, well, this might be incorrect. I may be wrong. I've done the research.
Yeah, by all means, fact check me.
Yeah, it's not like you're being hateful about it. And if somebody comes back on you, then that just shows to me that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They're getting defensive because they know they're screwed up and they don't have anything to back it up as far as I'm concerned. So, but anyway, that's just my opinion,
Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence. You've been one of the best supporters of the new show, so.
I have to admit, though, my phone has been fucking up a lot lately, and I've had to reset it like 5 times, so I keep losing your feed.
Oh, jeez.
So I need to re-add it to my podcatcher. Try to keep up with it. But anyway, since I'm technically paying for part of it, so not that I'm...
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
I'm just saying, I guess I should listen to it. But anyway, Cory, I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I often get the impression that I'm not a very good interviewee, so it gives me a chance to hone my skills the more shows I'm on.
I think you do a good job. And it's like I said, it's not so much if you're a good talker or speaker, whatever you want to call it. To me, is if you're able to get your thoughts and out there in a coherent manner, and I'm not worried so much with rhetorical prowess or anything like that.
Right.
I'm just interested in trying to find out people's stories and learn shit that they're talking about and what they do. And, everybody's got their own story. And I think yours is pretty fascinating, to be honest with you. I mean,
I appreciate that.
do live in the fucking backwoods of Canada or whatever. But.
Yeah, definitely in the, well, Regina, I live in the city now. But
the city. The city. That's right.
Yeah. Actually, even by Canadian standards, Regina's a pretty small city, too. Like, we're still only, I think, 300,000 people here.
Jeez. I don't know. Manitoba, Winnipeg, I was looking at that. There is not anything.
Yeah, Winnipeg's a shithole.
I'm like, there's nothing within, like, hundreds of miles of that place.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, man, that place has to be real fun. Anyway.
I don't know. Do they have a hockey team again? They were trying to get it back.
Yeah, they got the Jets back, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only thing it's the only thing they do have, I reckon. I don't know what else.
Yeah,
you can have.
Saskatchewan, we just have our good CFL team, the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Yeah, the Rough Riders. But I'm sorry, that's not real football. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
Our field's longer.
I know, and longer than uprights are narrower, I think. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Some shit, whatever you Canadians do. You take our shit and you fucking bastardize it,
We twist it around a little bit.
That's all right. We'll give you a pass on that. No pun intended. Anyway, all right, Corey. Well, I guess I'll let you get back to Canadianing, Canucking. Yeah. I don't know what y'all call it.
Yeah. Tonight is hot dogs over the fire in the backyard. So that's my plan for now.
That actually sounds not bad with some beer. It might be good.
You betcha.
All right. Well, you betcha. Okay, sorry. You betcha. That sounds like
you betcha, eh?
That sounds like Minnesota or something. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, Corey. Well, I won't hold you any longer. Take care of yourself, okay?
Thanks. You too, man.
That'll do it for this episode of the Podunk Polymath Podcast. I want to thank Cory Johnston for coming on and talking to me. It's a great conversation, and I quite enjoyed it. Of course, not just because I love him and want to have his children, but because he's a cool guy all around. Of course, if you want to check out the podcast, you can come to thepodunkpolymath.com. The music is by ... You can find their music at cdbaby.com/cd/... You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Google Plus under Podunk Polymath. You can email the show at podunk.polymath@gmail.com. Of course, you become part of the Patreon posse, patreon.com/thepodunkpolymath. If you want to leave a voicemail on the call-in number, which apparently nobody does, 615-378-POPO-7676. You can join the Podunk Polymath Podcast Posse Facebook group at facebook.com/group/the Podunk Polymath Podcast Posse, all separated by periods. Of course, there's also a store, online store, zazzle.com/podunk_polymath. Click on the sidebar. You can follow me on WordPress. See a little box with my tweets in there. PayPal donate button. You can subscribe on RSS, Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. And there's a button for Patreon and recent posts and recent comments. I forgot to mention in the pre-ramble, because imagine that I forgot something. The 1-year anniversary of the show is upcoming. It will be August 15th. The episode's going to come out the 14th, the day before. If you want to send me some clips or something, tell me how much you hate me, or how much you love me, I'll leave it up to you. Celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the Podunk Polymath Podcast. Of course, you can email it to me at the email address, podunk.polymath@gmail.com, or you can call the call-in line and leave something. So, whatever you like to do, I would appreciate anything y'all can send me. I am really happy that I've gotten this far, and I'm really happy that so many people have listened, and I've got a lot of positive feedback. So I want to thank everybody who has made this show a success, and I want to thank Jesus. No, I'm just kidding. There isn't any such thing. Again, thanks for listening. I really do appreciate everybody who listens, and I appreciate being able to do it. Not everybody has the opportunity to do this sort of thing. It's something I love to do. Until next time, y'all take it easy now, okay?